Hello, I'm Rob Green. I'm the founder of Rectec and welcome to Rectec Reels. For those of you who don't know, Rectec Reels is our bite-sized podcast series bringing experts from across the recruitment, TA and HR technology industry to explore one specific challenge that organizations are facing today, sharing practical experience-led insights on how to navigate it. Today's focus is a really important shift that we're seeing across the industry. It's a move away from traditional time and materials contractor engagements towards a fixed price milestone-based delivery using clear statements of work. And now to help us unpack what that actually means in practice, I'm joined by Shoaib Qureshi from Hubbado, and Hubbado are one of Rectec's trusted vendor partners, and Shoaib works very closely with organizations and agencies who are managing complex contractor and delivery models. So he's seen firsthand what works and also what can go wrong when statements of work aren't done properly. Shoaib, great to have you with us.
Hey
To kick
Rob.
things off, can you introduce yourself and just share a bit about your background and your experience in this space?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah. Hey Robbie, and thanks for having us on board for this session. Looking forward to it. Look, my background is actually from delivering statement works projects. That was my early career. Did a lot of consultancy and a lot of IT projects, from very simple sort of telecoms projects to big contact center software projects. And when I joined Hubbado, when we started Hubbado about 10 years ago, to build recruitment software, one of the things that we genuinely saw in the marketplace was a desire for recruiters to move into more statement of works type projects, move away from the T&M world. So one of the focuses we had for the software that we were building was to enable companies to build statement of works, even if they're not particularly familiar with those kinds of projects. There is, a sort of a process to building statement of works. And if you're not familiar with that, you can get tripped up very easily. So, yeah, look, I think right now, statement of works it's getting more and more prevalent. I think there's been a lot of talk about it for the last 2, 3, 4 years. There still hasn't been that step from recruiters as much as I'd like to see into that space. Right now, consultancies, they're ripe for competing with, and I think recruitment agencies with the technology that exists today, especially with AI coming on board as well, it's really now a good time to sort of start stepping into that statement of works, fixed price deliverable project environment.
Makes total sense. And for those of our audience that are listening to this that completely agree with you that statements of work are important to their business, could you tell us like why statements of work documents are so critical to a project success, and particularly, in fixed price or milestone-based engagements?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the central piece of documentation, I guess, when you're quoting for or even then managing the delivery of a project. And it really does take the difference away from time and materials. Time and materials projects can go on and on and on. There's
Mm.
very little incentive from the contractor's point of view to
To get
put
it
put an end
finished.
date to put an end date on the time and materials contract, right? And at the same time, the client's kind of putting a lot of trust into their people to just, right, here you go, here's time and materials. The internal team may well create a statement of works projects, but there's very little incentive around the table for everyone to work to that. Yeah, people are getting paid a day rate, and ultimately, I very rarely see a T&M project meet its deadlines or meet its budget. It always, it always exceeds. Now, with statement of works, I think, yeah, you're tied in. It makes people think about the project a lot more. It makes them think about the steps that need to be taken, how long those steps will take, the estimated resource, when those timelines need to be inserted into the project plan. So just the process of creating that document, it starts people thinking exactly what they need to do. And then you can outsource those services. You can get the right people on board with the right skill sets who are available at the right time. You can put all of the pieces together and it should then flow very, very well. I would say, for recruitment teams that are stepping into this space now, don't go for the big project transformation or the business transformation projects. Go for smaller pieces of work, between 5 grand and 100 grand, something that's manageable. And make sure you can do the statement of works yourself, and there's subsections of the statement of work that we'll come on to in a minute that maybe you might want to get specialist help for. But yeah, those parts of the statement of works, they really are critical to defining what you're delivering.
That makes a lot of sense. It also highlights why getting the basics right really matters. And we're going to come on to talk about actually what goes into a statement of work. So when you're looking at strong statements of work, what are the essential elements that every statement of work should include to set up all parties for success?
Yeah, okay. So there's the piece that obviously there's the you want to go through your principles and know your objectives of the project itself. What is that we're trying to achieve? What is it that the customer's trying to achieve?
Mm.
And just give the high level objectives. Now, a subsection of the statement of work is the scope of works. Now, the scope of works, and it is very interchangeable. People often call a scope of works a statement of works, or vice versa. Um, uh, either's fine. But from a technical definition, a scope of works is a subset of the statement of works, and the scope of works is where you really start detailing every single specific task and the estimated resource effort to deliver that task and what deliverable comes out of that task. So you're really now defining what deliverables the customer is going to receive from this project. Go into the minute detail.
Mm.
Now, sometimes with this scope of work section, when you're quoting for a project, you may not want to go into that level of detail. The scope of work is really something that you want to pull in a project manager when you're delivering the actual work. Um, if a customer's asking you to deliver a detailed scope of works before you've won the deal, I'd see that as a bit of a red flag sometimes, unless you're a consultancy who's done many of these things and
Yeah.
you can whip up a scope of works really quickly. I would avoid doing a very detailed scope of works as part of the quotation phase, but definitely it needs some high level information in there, and then you get a project manager to do the detailed scope of works afterwards.
No, I
And then
would.
sorry, go on, Rob.
I was going to say I wouldn't call myself an absolute expert in this space like you clearly are, but I also, in my experience of statements of work, including scopes of work, I would have thought, particularly for some of the larger projects, really important. Where I've been like personally impacted by perhaps not doing that so well in the past is where the scope of work includes everything that is in the project, but doesn't necessarily call out what isn't in the project. And that, for me, is sort of personally led to some grey areas or questions that perhaps could be better avoided if that
Yeah,
scope of work says, this is what's in, this is what's out.
exactly, and that is absolutely critical. So, as part of the scope is then your exclusions and your inclusions, and you do want to get that right at the quotation phase. There's been some disastrous projects that I've been aware of purely because at the
Yeah,
quotation stage it wasn't implicit what was included and what was excluded, and therefore the
yeah,
customers got an idea of what was included, and it gets quite messy. So you really want to have within your scope of works the exclusions and inclusions,
yeah,
and then all the other sections are timelines and milestones. How long is this going to take? What could be expected as the major milestones? Your payment terms should be in there. Are you going to do it on a deliverable basis? Are you going to do it on a deposit basis and a timeline basis? Once month three is done, we'll give you X amount of money, or is it on deliverables and milestones? So that is all part of your negotiation that you want to do that. And part of that negotiation, you do need to start sort of putting that into your inclusions and exclusions, tie those together. If the customer is trying to, force you to more difficult payment terms, then yeah, let's try and exclude more things from the
mm,
project. And this is where you get into that negotiation phase of what's in, what's out, what are the payment terms, what are the performance standards. So the statement of work would include all of those elements.
yeah. And I can see it being something that you could either invest a huge amount of time in, and that statement of work could be very complex. And to somebody picking it up for the first time, might potentially look at that statement of work and think maybe the project is bigger than what it is if you've gone too heavy on the detail. So how do you kind of strike the right balance between being detailed enough to protect everyone involved without creating that kind of unnecessary complexity of slowing delivery down?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that I've already sort of mentioned this. There's two ways to approach this. We're at quotation stage. Get yourself a statement of works, and definitely make the scope of works quite light. When you get into project delivery, that's when you go into your detail around the scope of works and go into each task. Make sure all the stakeholders sign off on each task. You don't want to, especially with recruitment teams, which are very sort of sales engineer orientated.
Mm.
Um, this whole quotation piece you don't want it to get too detailed because then you'll just get bogged down in the detail. You get bogged down into negotiating with the client, the ins and outs. You really just want to give them an indication of the overall price, the timelines, and the resource effort required. Um, Try not to go too heavy on the detail. I think those kind of things can often backfire, and they can or sometimes raise more questions during the quotation stage than not. You really want the detail to come into it once you've got the project manager and the resources assigned, and they can provide a much better detailed analysis of the scope than somebody at the quotation phase can.
Excellent. I guess that's where the real world experience comes into play. I have one last question for you, Shoaib,
Yeah,
and that
sure.
is, have you got a particular example of sort of where a strong statement of work has genuinely saved a project, or conversely, where a weak or unclear one has caused any major issues?
Yeah. Oh man, there's something I can pick from, but from both of them. Yeah, there's one that sticks out in my mind, and it was one of the first projects I ever did, and I guess that's why it sticks out in my mind because it was an experience of where something had been forgotten, and it was back in my telco days. And at this quotation phase, the sales guy hadn't really. This is a good example of where sales and delivery should really talk to each other. Sales guy had sort of thought he knew it all, and he did the quotation himself. And it went out to the client, and going back to your thing, Rob, about inclusions and exclusions, it didn't
Yeah.
make it clear what was included and excluded. And it was a charity. And it turned up with the engineers installed the telephone system. It was a little call center system, but there was no wiring in place. And the client was fully expecting the engineers to install all the wiring. And yeah, the quotation made it imply that we would provide the end-to-end solution.
Right.
And so once it started to get a little bit messy, I had to get my boss involved. He had to get the lawyers involved, and the lawyer was like, "Yeah, look, you've kind of indicated that you're going to do the end-to-end solution, which would
Yeah.
include the wiring." And that basically, I mean, the project was a complete loss. Our costs doubled, and it was just a little line to say, wiring is excluded. Just a simple little thing like that would have made sure that that project was profitable, and it would have been, a very nice, easy project. But it was a charity, and we took on board the cost, and it was a shame because yeah, once you get into that sort of conversation, you start to lose relationship and trust with the customer. And so we made a loss on the project. The customer went away. We're never going to get that customer back, and never going to be able to get the opportunity to try and make that a profitable customer. It was a
It's
bad project.
a very, very good example of why a statement of work is so important if you're going to go into this kind of way of working.
Yeah,
And also, yeah, I think for me, that's probably the most critical part of this is making sure that any kind of subjective elements of the statement of work or the scope of work are really clearly defined in the
yeah,
SOW. It's
yeah.
yeah, cool. Uh, yeah, amazing example. I don't have any more questions for you, but just to close things out, if you are currently exploring recruitment, HR, or TA technology, then Rectec is obviously right here to help you. Through Rectec Copilot, we create highly matched, tailored recommendations to each organization's needs, connecting you to organizations like Hubbado, if that's what you need right now, helping you find the right software faster and with confidence. You can get started today at rectec.io. Thank you for watching, and thank you again to Shard for being such a valuable guest. And I know because we've already spoken about this, there's another one coming. So if you want to learn more about contractor management or learn more about the Hubbado platform, do reach out to Shoaib and presumably Shoaib as well. Just before we close out, presumably if anybody watching this today has any kind of requirements around how to structure a statement of work, have you got any kind of templates or anything like that that you can share that might be valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got templates. We've got we're actually working with our own platform at the moment. We're actually trying to introduce a bit of AI that can auto generate a template based on what kind of project that you're trying to deliver. So we're actually trying to build a suite of templates that are applicable for the kind of project that a person's doing or a company's doing.
Amazing, great stuff. Thanks again for watching, and thank you again, Shoaib, for joining us.
That's
See
all.
you next time on Rectec Reels.
Thanks, Rob.